Thank you very much, Tom. If I'm ever missing, just talk to the Mayor of Rio. He knows exactly where to find me. Thank you, Tom, and thank you to everyone for coming along this morning to this very special day and for inviting me to speak to you. I really do appreciate any opportunity that I get to talk about our Olympic team and our wonderful Olympic athletes. And that's what I'll focus on primarily today, my approach to and lessons learnt from the huge honour that it was to lead the Australian Olympic team into the Rio Olympic Games last year. Great honour, indeed, but as Tom alluded to, an even greater challenge. The role of chef was an enormous honour above all else, but it was almost also an enormous responsibility. It was incredibly challenging and in many ways daunting. It was knowing that what was ahead was potentially life-changing or life-defining for not only me, but for the 900 athletes and officials and coaches that there were in the team. It was a role that required absolute and utter focus and commitment. It was a role that meant unturning every little stone, leaving nothing to chance. It was a role that I knew would make me laugh, but also cry, that would make me proud, but also paranoid. It was a role that provoked thoughts and feelings and emotions and a fair degree of frustration that I never knew existed. I was the first ever female appointed as chef de mission of an Australian Olympic team, winter or summer, and one of a very small percentage of females amongst the 205 other National Olympic Committees competing in Rio. Clearly, the Australian Olympic Committee Board and our President John Coates knew how tough Rio was going to be. That's why they put a female in charge this time for the first time. To be honest, though, I never play the female card. While, of course, I respect, understand and greatly respect the honour that it was to be the first female appointed to that position, to me it was just about doing the best job that I could do, regardless of my gender, regardless of the gender of my predecessors, and regardless of the gender of the majority of my peers and colleagues in the male-dominated world of sport. When I was appointed chef de mission in August 2013, many of the media reports said that the glass ceiling had finally cracked in the Olympic world. And I remember one of the very first interviews I did with a journalist, male journalist, and he said, "Oh, congratulations, Kitty, and what are you going to do to be a good female chef de mission?" I said, "Bugger all." And he looked at me, and I said, "But I'm going to do everything in my power to be a good chef de mission, full stop." And that remained my mantra throughout. I did everything within my power to do the best job possible. And do is the operative word there. I remember thinking at the time that you can be chef de mission or you can do it. And I knew which I would choose. It's not in my nature to go along for the ride with anything that I do. My approach to leadership and management is to be involved, to do as well as to be, to roll the sleeves up when required, to ensure you understand all the components at an operational level to fully inform your strategic decision-making. That means, above all else, to have a very clear vision and to ensure that that vision is demonstrated and implemented operationally at all levels. Now, I just want to go back for a sec to what I said earlier, that I don't play the female card, and especially on a day like this, I certainly don't mean any disrespect by that statement. All my life, though, I've just chosen to not entertain the thought that I may be disadvantaged or discriminated against being a female working in the very male-dominated world of sport. Maybe I actually have been disadvantaged. I don't know. It's just not a factor for me, and it never has been. If you feel or think that you will be disadvantaged or discriminated against before you even start, guess what? It's more than likely that you will be. My approach is always just head down, focus on what's required, give it your all, have an unrelenting attention to detail, and leave absolutely no stone unturned. And most importantly, communicate clearly and effectively, and take those around you on the journey with you right from the start. Be very clear and direct in articulating your vision and inspiring those involved to aspire to that vision. Stay true to your values, stay true to your message, and retain your integrity at all times, even if that means that you might attract some opposition. Because leaders, especially those in the public and media spotlight, very often do attract intense scrutiny and opposition. Much of it largely unfair, I have to say. And it's very difficult when you're in a leadership position where you can't defend yourself or justify your actions to those naysayers who are largely ill or totally uninformed. All you can do is to trust your own good intentions, harness that support around you, and not waver from the message. I have to admit, in retrospect, that this component of the chef de mission role, the personal scrutiny and abuse, and I can tell you, I received some horrific personal abuse on social media. The death threats. This was one area I was not at all prepared for, because everything that we did as a leadership team was aimed at the benefit of the athlete. Every decision, every appointment, every policy, I asked myself the question, and I asked our headquarters staff to ask themselves as the question, will this decision, policy, appointment, will this help the boat go quicker? Because at the end of the day, that's what we're about. Everything we did, everything I did, was aimed at ensuring that our wonderful athletes had the best environment and platform for success. So that criticism was hard to fathom and even harder to swallow. And that component of the role certainly took a huge personal toll on me. Was it worse because I was a female? Interesting question. As I said earlier, being the first female in the role was not an issue for me. But many people around me have since said that the fact I was a female in this role and was perceived as someone fairly strong and direct in their convictions, that being female attracted a much greater degree of criticism than if it had have been a male in the role, saying exactly the same things that I had over the last few years. So even though I said earlier that I chose not to worry about potentially being disadvantaged as a female in sport, in retrospect, I probably unfortunately agree that in this particular case, my gender probably did cause or attract greater criticism. Is that right? Of course not. Does it mean that a female leader should then bow to that pressure and compromise what they're trying to do? Absolutely not. Because you know what, even if it was the case that being a female did, for whatever reason, attract a greater degree of criticism, I would not have changed. Above all else, in any leadership role, you need to be prepared to stand up and fight for what you believe in, to fight for the mandate that you've been asked to deliver. Anything less than that, in my mind, is showing disrespect for the role that you've been awarded. So as tough as it was personally at times, it was worth it, because I was fighting for something and standing for something that I truly believed in and something that I'd been asked to deliver on. And that was to reinvigorate the culture of our Olympic team after some issues in London. No need to go into those issues now, that's past history. But the focus on culture in Rio was a very deliberate one from our entire leadership team. I've been involved with 9 games now, Olympic Games, Commonwealth, Asian Games and World University Games in various guises. As an athlete, a section manager, a coach, member of the media team, and more recently as deputy chef and then chef de mission. Rio was by far the most challenging of those 9 games, in fact probably more challenging than the other 8 lumped together. And I certainly learnt a lot of lessons along the journey. I learnt a lot about plumbing, for instance, how to fix leaking toilets, how to identify gas leaks, and how to put out fires, literally as well as figuratively. Rio is now widely acknowledged as the most difficult and challenging games that there's ever been in the modern Olympics. Zika, which Tom referred to, bloody Zika, did not see one mosquito in my 7 weeks in Rio. I just wanted to see one so I could whack it for all the trouble that it had given us. The very, very real security concerns, incomplete venues just days before the Games, a largely inexperienced organising committee, a dysfunctional and widely acknowledged corrupt government, an impeached president, a flailing economy, and of course, for us, the final bonus surprise factor, an athletes' village that was neither safe nor habitable when we first arrived. We knew that Rio, the first ever Olympic Games in South America, would be tough, not only for us as a leadership team, but for everybody involved, the 900 people, athletes and officials in our team. So we braced ourselves. We didn't hide from the fact that it was going to be tough, and I did my best to ensure that all of us were as aware as we possibly could be of all the challenges, and we were as prepared as we could be for them. In our lead-in meetings and forums, I told our officials that in order to not only succeed, but just to survive in Rio, we would need to be beyond resilient. We needed to be Braziliant. And boy, did we ever. I started a diary when we first arrived in Rio, and every night, and I have to say I got an average of 3.5 hours sleep every night for the 7 weeks that I was there. So one night, it was actually day 3 of the Games. I opened my diary, wrote everything in it for the day, put it aside, and then I suddenly remembered, oh heavens, that's right, the ceiling in the dining hall had collapsed that morning. The dining hall was a huge aircraft hangar, and the air conditioning units and ceiling had collapsed. 1,000 people had to be evacuated, including several hundred Australians. So something like that, the dining hall ceiling collapsing, actually became almost a minor occurrence with everything else that was going on. On that very same day, for instance, day 3, we had a power blackout in our building. All the lifts broke down, and we had about a dozen athletes stuck in the lifts on their way to competition and training. We had a bomb scare alert at the Edge, which was our Australian sub-site, our home away from home, and we had athletes, family and friends on their way to the Edge and stuck in the Edge during the alert. And we had 3 bullets that went through the media tent at the equestrian venue, and I had 2 staff in there working and athletes competing just outside. And that night, my driver got horrifically lost, and we were driving around the favelas or the slums, which is not the safest place to be in Rio at night, for 2.5 hours. That was all, honestly, in the space of just one day, and that was not a day out of the ordinary. That was a regular occurrence. It was every day waking up and thinking, okay, what's going to happen today? There was also, of course, the state of the athletes' village when we arrived, not safe or habitable. There were no smoke alarms, no fire extinguishers, no evacuation protocols. Cement had been deliberately poured down the toilets and the sinks by the contractors working on the village who hadn't